see all his opinions here in the footnote. They're put separate from the text itself, keeping the text intact and allowing me to read his interpretations with his bias in mind. And I think that's much more upfront and honest than what you find. So anyway, what I wanted to read was love. As I said, everyone's talking about pride right now, but that's not where the truth lies. The truth lies in love. If I could speak in every tongue of men and that of messengers, and there should be no love in me, I should be like brass that resounds, or like a cymbal that makes noise. And if there should be in me the gift of prophecy, and I should understand all the mysteries and every science, and if there should be in me all faith so that I could move mountains, and love should not be in me, I should be nothing. And if I should feed out to the poverty-stricken all that I possess, and if I should give my body so that I may boast, and there should be no love in me, I gain nothing. So, for boast, right, if I should give my body so I may boast, Murdoch followed a Greek reading and wrote to be burned. That's what you'll see in a lot of Greek translations. However, the Aramaic word yakat also, and more correctly in this case, means to boast. This is another smoking gun, no pun intended, for Aramaic primacy, since even Greek manuscripts are split between burn and boast, and since these are two completely different words in Greek, the explanation for such divergence is simply that all Greek translations were derived from an Aramaic original. Right, because otherwise why would they have two different words there? Well, it makes sense. They're translating from the word yakat. So, a lot of sense is made that way. So then he continues, Jewish sages to name a portion of the Talmud, namely the Gemara. Completeness and perfection. When I was a child, I talked as a child, and I reasoned as a child, and I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I laid aside the things of childhood. It's not just a man, but the word here is gaucha, a protector, guardian, responsible leader. So, a position more than a sex. And now we see as by a mirror in dark reflection, but then face to face. Now I know partially, but then I will know, just as I am known. For these things, these three things are abiding: faith and hope and love. But the greatest of these is love. I'm going to read that again, but soft spoken this time. Chapter 13. If I could speak in every tongue of men and in that of messengers, and there should be no love in me, I should be like brass that resounds, or the cymbal that makes a noise. And if there should be in me the gift of prophecy, and I should understand all the mysteries and every science, and if there should be in me all faith, so that I could move mountains, and love should not be in me, I should be nothing. And if I should feed out to the poverty-stricken all that I possess, and if I should give my body so that I may boast or to be burned, and there shall be no love in me, I gain nothing. Love is patient and is kind. Love is not envious. Love does not shout loudly and is not boastful, and does nothing that causes shame, and seeks not her own, is not passionate, and thinks no evil. It does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes for all, and endures all. Love will never cease, but prophesying will end, and tongues will be stopped, and knowledge will disappear. For we know but partially, and we prophesy but partially. So this was the take from the American English, the Aramaic English, I don't know what I'm doing, translation. But there's also a Jewish translation. This is done by a Jewish person. But there is also a Jewish translation that takes the Greek original and then transcribes it into Hebrew of the day, even though it is not thought it would have been written in Hebrew. What this does is bring back to the words he would have spoken, because he was a young man who grew up speaking Aramaic and Hebrew. So it kind of pulls you back almost to the oral tradition, but in a roundabout way. And so it's items that would be familiar with other Jewish people, of course slightly modernized, but here I will read it to you. I will read it to you softly, softly, softly. I really hope you're doing okay today. I really feel sick, but I just really wanted Kehila in Corinth 1, chapter 13. If in the leshonot of Bnei Adam and Malachim I speak, but I do not have Ahava, I have become only a sounding gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have Nevuah and have da'as of all sardot and all da'as, and if I have all emunah so as to remove mountains, but Ahava I do not have, I am nothing. And if I'm a machbitz tzedekah, and I give in all I possess in gemilut chasadim, and if I give my body al kiddush Hashem for sereifa, but ahava I do not have, I have gained nothing. Ahava suffers long. Ahava is kind. Ahava does not have kaina. Ahava does not brag. Ahava is not puffed up in ga'ava. Ahava does not behave shamelessly. Ahava does not in anochiut insist on its own way. Ahava is not touchy and vindictive, keeping a record of wrongs. Ahava does not find simcha in evil, but rejoices in haemes. Ahava covers all things, believes all things, has tikva, even sitzfleisch for all things. Ahava never fails. However, divrei nevuah will be abolished, leshonot will cease, da'as will come to an end, for we have da'as in part, and we have divrei nevuah in part. But when shlema comes, the tail vice will disappear. When I was a yeled, I used to speak like one, think like one, reason like one. But when I became mevukar, I put away kinderyon. For still we see through a mirror indistinctly, but then in the olam haba distinctly, panim el panim. Now I have da'as only in part. Then I will have da'as fully, even as also Hashem had full da'as of me. But now remain emunah, tikva, and ahava. But now remain emunah, tikva, and ahava, these shalosh, and the greatest of these is ahava. This is my say, and this is shay. Arabic, right? So, and of course the Kiddush. The Kiddush is the part that the Messiah adopted and altered. Because here's the thing, every Friday night, forever, Jewish people have taken the challah and the wine every Friday night and drunk it, the challah often representing Israel. And that's what, forever. And of course, there's a special version of that Kiddush during Passover, Seder, and either he celebrated his early dinner that year, and he was having the challah when he broke bread and said, "I am the bread," which means that he's connecting himself with all the 12 tribes of Israel. Or he was actually having his Passover dinner, and it's possible to debate what day of the week exactly that he died and what day of the week exactly. But the understanding that I have come to after reading a number of different Midrashic commentaries and trying to look at the Midrash myself, and you have to look into it yourself, is that we know there's 2 nights of Passover. He could have eaten the first night, and on the second night, he could have, yes, we do live in the past, he could have eaten the first night, and then on the second night, he could have been sacrificed, right? Because he is the Passover Seder, or the Passover lamb, right? But it's my understanding that the feast nights didn't become like that until after the diaspora, after Rome, in which case it would have just been just one Passover night, in which case he didn't get to eat the Passover, and the bread he broke was the leavened bread, and he died on Passover as the Passover lamb. Either is plausible. Either way, he took this long-standing tradition of this thing that happens every Friday night before the Shabbat, and he identified it with himself. He said that he was the thing that this Jewishness had been looking forward to, which was a very arrogant and bold thing to say, and I love him for it. It's always good to shock religion a little bit while still keeping every single commandment, which is pretty difficult to do. It's difficult to shock people without doing wrong, although sometimes doing good will shock people too. So, the 3 traditional times in Jewish prayer are Ma'ariv, Shacharit, and Minha. The outline of major prayers remains the same for all 3 services, except for the addition of readings of the weekly Torah portion on Monday and Thursday mornings during Shacharit, and the omission of the recitation of the Baruch and Shema like Minha, and the omission of the service leaders' repetition of Amidah during Shacharit. So traditional weekday service, you would start with a psalm, then a Baruch and a Shema, then the Amidah, Torah service. It's many, many, many things. They have so many of these additional readings and blessings too. They have a festival liturgy as well. It's a pretty complete little siddur. Einstein once said, on the way to making his E equals mc squared. He said that the beginning of a problem will look very simple. As you get to know it better, it becomes very complex. That's why it's kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect, that like somebody who knows nothing about a problem, it'll look very simple to them. So it'll be really easy for them to mouth off and say all kinds of stuff. But as you get to know it better, you learn that the problem is very complex. But then when you come out on the other side of it, the solutions will be elegant and simple. That's why E equals mc squared is such a beautiful example of physical discovery, right? Because that's what it is. It's so simple. It's a simple, simple way to say that energy and mass can be turned into each other, depending on the speed of light. And it tells us so much more about the universe, about special relativity, about time even, which becomes inferred when we start thinking about the speed of light being different, because it's constant in all times, in all reference planes, which is insane. So, I think the complexity of somebody like, if there is a God like God, and once you meet that person, it will be either very simple, very complex, or very simple again. And the beginning of the journey, it will be simple enough to be approachable, and it becomes very complex. Because if this is real, then the scientific implications, the archaeological implications, the historical implications, there's so much to wade through. And though finding that one is worth everything in the world, there's a story about someone who found a pearl of great price. I'll read it to you. I will read it to you. Pearl of great price. I forgot which one it was. Here we go. This is the Aramaic, as I said before, based on the chorus. Listen to that nice sound. Based on the chorus and Vision Codexes. Let's go. Listen to these pages. Oh, that's a long one. Alright. Here it's further. That's so long. Here we go. The kingdom of heaven is likened to a treasure that is hidden in a field, that which a man finds and hides, and from his joy goes and sells everything he owns and buys that field. Is he willing to give up everything he owns? It's because he knows there's something of great treasure that's going to be worth more than everything he owns. And then with that treasure, he'll be able to buy everything he owns back, right? Life is like that. Often the things that Hashem asks us to give up, He actually gives Pasha. But I think it's an arrogance to believe that we all actually know what it means, given that these are ancient documents. Modern Hebrew and modern Greek aren't even like the Greek and Hebrew that are spoken at those times. There are entire words in Hebrew that we just don't know what are. Right? So pretending as if we know the answer, we have the answer, but that doesn't mean we know.
resources like